Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about the Wild West. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Hi Frederick, what are some common practices of large enterprises with hundreds of thousands of microservices communicating through various technologies such as Kafka, RabbitMQ, Mongo, Oracle, etc.? We've had problems with our staging environment becoming super unstable because it's become the Wild West of software development. Well, I would say that there are no real common practices to this problem. Rather, well, there are common practices, but no, as far as I've seen, no larger scale software company has really figured out how to avoid things to become the Wild West. There are a few examples of people who I think are on the right track, but I've so far never really seen a company who has a solution to this issue. And fundamentally, it comes down to that, at least in my opinion, practically every IT company struggles with creating a unified strategy for how to deal with their technology overall. Like, how do you unify a company of thousands of people into a at least similar vision of how things should work within the IT department and between all the software teams and so forth? Because the common practice today, as you may or may not be aware of, is that I like to say it is sort of the pile problem, where most of management within IT don't really know anything about IT. So what they usually do is that they hire people who they believe will be able to solve their problem, and then they put them in a pile. Now, what the effect of that basically is, as I like to say, you're basically betting on that this pile of people will automatically figure out how to solve the company's problems. And every time it's like a slot machine. You draw on the slot machine, you see the bars come up, and you just pray and hope that this time you're gonna win, or this time you have the right combination of people and processes and empowerment and all these terms that you hear people talk about within any corporate organization, basically. And that's why I would say that the thing that you are experiencing, especially, and this I've made videos about this as well, guys. This is one of the factors that I usually use when I say that you may not need that QA or staging environment, or you may not be able to think about your QA and staging environments as some type of insurance policy that things are going to work in production, because realistically, as I've said before, guys, unless you have a very similar setup to that of your other dependencies and like other upstream systems from yourself, there is very little in terms of guarantees that your QA or staging environment is going to give you a realistic, to give you a hint if something's going to work in production or not. And this is also why I tell people that the only environment, in essence, that you can always quote unquote trust, at least as far as it's possible within your organization, is the production environment. And I have videos where I sort of talk about like different ways of handling testing and things like that in production and so forth. And I know that that is a taboo topic because everybody has their idea of that, oh yeah, if you're testing in production, you're basically incompetent, or if you're not using a staging environment or QA environment, you're basically flying blind and so forth. And I have tons of other videos where we can sort of address that sort of stuff. But if you ask me personally, what I think is the fundamental thing you have to achieve in order to solve this Wild West problem, it's basically twofold. First and foremost, you need to understand that quality of the system as a whole starts with having quality at the team level. In essence, what I'm telling you is that if you just let every software team in your company do whatever they want, and you have no control over any type of consistency, you don't have any shared type of values of how to do things or what's the proper way of deploying or handling releases or anything like that, everybody just does whatever they want. You are basically, as I said, this is the pile problem. You're basically just putting people in a pile and hoping that they are sort of figuring out how to do things. And I promise you, At a local level, like for a single system, they're most likely going to be able to figure that out depending on the talent level of these individuals. The thing that I am talking about here, though, is that that's basically like just having a bunch of different companies within a company. You're basically letting people just create their own idea of what they need to make, and unless you have something that ties them all together, it's very unlikely that they will be able, especially if they're going to integrate to each other and collaborate and cooperate across team borders and things like that. It's not a very efficient strategy. So what people usually do here, guys, and this is the solution people have when they have figured this part out, is that what they will do is that they will hire people like, well, technically like me, or people at my sort of job description type of thing. They will hire staff engineers, they will hire principal engineers, or some type of tech lead or something like that. They will try to add another layer on top of the teams, and then these people are here to basically oversee all the things that are going on within the organization. You have architects and things like that, or solution architects or so forth. Uh, and that is essence the next problem, because now it's the pile problem all over again. So you basically create a pile of people, and then they go out, and hopefully these people also, slot machine again, you hope that these people have the necessary talent in order to figure out how to structure the landscape between all the people within the organization. And the success rate of this varies a lot, both from person to person, depending on who you're hiring, but it's also down to how is your organization structured. Do they have any type of authority? Do they have any type of ability to create, allocate things on somebody's backlog or things like that? More often than not, I see that a lot of the architects and principal engineers and staff engineers, they're sort of useful, and in many cases the work that they produce comes down to they create a Confluence page somewhere where someone might read that at some point. Which brings me to the other thing that I argue is necessary, because this would be the first thing, but the second thing that isn't very necessary is that you basically have to have a goal as a company to create a sustainable ecosystem of services. In other words, if you're not putting any requirements on that the systems themselves need to follow some basic practices, ideally set by your most experienced and talented developers, and secondly that they also design like APIs that are meant to be possible to consume from different systems and so forth, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to create a well-working holistic system. You might create a single system that works fairly well, but working in a distributed system, it's not going to go so well for you if you don't have some type of unifying idea of how to do that. And that really comes down to one part having, as I said, the right engineers, but it's also about having the sort of engineers that understand the importance of standardization and, above all else, the value of building communities. Because the problem with, as we talk about silos and things like that, well, you always ask people the same thing. So how do you break a silo? Everybody talks about silos being a problem, and then they want to break those silos, but as I've said before, nobody really knows in management how to fix that problem. And I will tell you a secret: most of the software engineers that you hire to solve this problem, the architects and like so forth and so forth, they don't know either. What they know is how to document things, how to create documentation and standardize things and make decrees and so forth. But they're not that great when it comes to figuring out how do I actually make sure that all of these processes that we're creating, that they actually have the benefit and the proper effect on the teams themselves. So what I want you to take away from this is that I would say that it is the norm, that it is the Wild West in basically every IT company. Every organization is different. And I argue that the reason why that is because most companies struggle with creating a unified strategy for how to deal with their technical landscape. In other words, they're really good at just allocating a budget for something, having a person hired to be responsible for that thing, and then basically in isolation creating a system that does something within the organization. that is fairly straightforward. The problem is when you have multiple systems that needs to start working together, or you have scheduling issues between teams or collaboration issues and things like that. And then comes the next layer, which is usually what happens when you started to, as I said, you've piled enough people into the problem and now they're sort of making things work, but it's not working the way you want. That's the slot machine. You just betted on that you had the right people and they would figure it out right, and now you do it again. It's just that now you're hiring the next level, which is staff engineers, principal engineers, etc., etc. But if you as an organization have no real vision or somebody with a vision for how to make sure that the landscape of your services and products work, then it's very difficult for you to make this work. This is what happens basically. And so what I argue to is that number one, you need to have some measurement of control, because as I said, your system's overall health comes down to the health of each individual team, because every team is in a distributed landscape, usually tied into some other part of your organization. So it's a network basically. If one node on the network works really well and all the others suck, well, then it doesn't matter if you have one team that is really performant. You need to be able to scale that to create these consistencies and standards between teams of how to do things in an efficient way, so that teams has a designed system that is meant to actually work within that ecosystem, and that requires a special type of strategy. The second part that you need is you need to have people who understand the value of creating standards and how to build communities, because it doesn't matter if you have the biggest master plan in the world on some Confluence page or some documentation page somewhere if nobody really is following it, and if you have no accountability and nobody really knows how to tie people together and actually make them not just sort of work the way that they like to work, but actually have a vested interest in working in alignment with what your architects are deciding, your staff engineers are promoting, all these sorts of people. If they're not reaching people and actually having an impact on the daily work of the teams, well, you have a lot of expensive documentation. That's basically what you're left with. Have a great day.